So, you're looking at building a new character, got the class down, and you're having trouble figuring out which one of those subclasses is best. Don't worry, I've got you, but buckle up because boy do we have a lot of classes to cover. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben, you here for another Pathfinder 2nd edition video, and welcome to the best subclass for every class in Pathfinder 2nd edition. This is going to be a long video. I'm guessing that the final video will end up being an hour and a half long by the time I am done recording here. Let's do a little bit of paperwork and busy work before we get going here. So first of all, thank you very much to everyone who is supporting this channel. This channel is doing a great job at showing continuous growth. And a lot of that is because people are supporting the content. Thank you to all of you who are supporting me financially via YouTube memberships. You get early access to all of my videos if you do that. And I've been sitting at 80 members for the last couple of months. That's a lot of people who are choosing to support me. So thank you for that support. It means a lot. It is making ambitious content like this happen. Now, I'm going to tell you that this video took a long time to research and put together, so this counts as 2. So I will be taking a week off the week of November 7th, but I think you'll enjoy this one, so here we go. My goal for today is to recommend just generically the best subclass for each fully released class here. I'm going to try to do this in a brief fashion. We've got 27 classes to cover. If I spend 2 minutes on each of those, we're already going to be at about an hour, and I'm certainly going to go over talking about a couple of them. Because I am covering so many classes, I'm not going to screenshot every ability. So if you need to pause and look up some things, no shame, because trust me, I looked up a lot of stuff in making this video. All of the classes are going to be time-stamped down below, so feel free to skip around if you're only interested in certain ones. Now, a couple of notes here. Number 1, the best is a very, very difficult term to define, as other recent videos have shown. So my recommendations here are largely going to be based on power level. It is very easy for a specific subclass to be better for your vision for your character. It is very easy for a subclass to be much better in your campaign than it might be in a vacuum. So the power gaming, the best options aren't always really going to be the best. And context and level and GM style can change these things. Nevertheless, I'm going to try to give you the best recommendations, whatever that exactly means. Now, I am frequently going to give you options when some of the things like circumstances are really going to matter a lot. And for classes that don't have true subclasses, because many of their choices are made in feats instead, I am still going to talk about the thing that is closest to a subclass for those classes. So there's something for everyone. Don't worry, fighters, we've got you covered too. And before I get going here, I would just like to take a moment to shout out all of the various people all around the world from all sorts of times who have done written Pathfinder content. I referenced a guide for probably about half of the classes while making this video, just to double check my thoughts versus community sentiment, and it was all very useful. So people like Terrandor and Gazebo Mimic and Flurry of Blunders, thank you very much for everything that you are doing for the community. And speaking of community, if you are not sure how to easily find guides for the various classes, I will link the guides to guides in my video description. It has all of your classes sorted here alphabetically, as well as some other topics, so that if you want to go, okay, how do I find a barbarian guide? This will be a very, very useful resource to do that. All right, and without further ado, let's start getting into our classes. First up is the alchemist, and I'm going to make different recommendations here for high and low level play. For low level play, I recommend the bomber. The big draw here is that you don't friendly fire. You don't deal splash damage with your bombs to your allies. And while it doesn't sound like that's all that big of a deal, in practice, I think it is. And I learned this recently in playing an exemplar who was doing splash damage. And we had a downed ally, and I made some attacks with the weapon that had splash damage. And then I realized that I would be hitting my downed ally and went, uh-oh, this is really, really bad. So you get to avoid situations like that by playing a bomber. And the other big draw is that you are good at triggering all sorts of weaknesses. And I don't just mean the elemental ones, because later on with the bomber, you can make it so that your bombs have the various like metal traits, your things like silver and cold iron and adamantine and all that sort of stuff. So you can trigger weaknesses versus all sorts of weird creatures. Fae, not a problem at all. But at higher levels, I actually think the medicine oriented one is much better. The chirurgeon. Etymology there, I believe, is ancient Greek for hair, which is hand. And I like these at level 13 and beyond. Because at that point, you don't roll for healing elixirs anymore. You just always get the maximum possible result. And stacking with the other abilities your subclass has already given you at that point, you are giving out maximum healing and temporary HP, and you are ignoring a new remaster trait called Coagulant that I'm not going to get into for the purposes of this video. And looking at this from a slightly different perspective, if you're optimizing for damage, Bomber might be the best, and if you're optimizing for utility, the Chirurgeon must be just better instead. Next up is the Animist, and there aren't going to be very many times in this video where I just say, I think there's an S tier option here. In all of our 27 classes, I think I'm going to say this about 4 times, but with the Animist, the Liturgist is just better than all of the other ones, and I, in my personal opinion, believe that it's so strong that it is difficult to realistically want to pick the other option. I think while playing a Liturgist, it is very easy to be close to a resourceless caster. If you have 2 focus points, it is very easy for you to cast a focus spell, use Circle of Spirits to change your primary apparition, cast a second focus spell, and then for the remainder of the combat, focus on sustaining both of them and just doing other things like moving around or doing skill checks with your remaining actions. It is so easy to play an animist without really using spell slots. And when you hit level 9 and you get the dancing invocation that allows you to sustain your spells basically for free as you are doing movement actions like stepping, the animist starts to feel very, very, very silly. And if you have any sort of combo that has to deal with stepping, your character just becomes cracked. For example, one of my favorites is Elf Step, which allows you to step twice. Well, guess what? That is 2 sustains. So if you have 2 focus spells going, it becomes 1 action, sustain both of them. I don't think I need to go into much more detail about how crazy that is. Liturgist is cracked. Next up is the Barbarian, and I recommend the Dragon Instinct. Is it the highest damage Barbarian? No way. But it is the highest damage Barbarian that has no drawback. And I think that is a really, really, really big deal. While some of the other instincts, most frequently people talk about the Giant Instinct Barbarian, but there's also Lignaeus as well, and I believe one other one that have higher damage output than the Dragon. But the Dragon Instinct has great damage, but no downside. You don't become clumsy or anything of that nature. So it's got great damage scaling. Honestly, it's got really, really excellent feats at basically all levels that the Instinct would give you a feat. And as a rarity for the Barbarian, you get a non-attacking action. At level 6, you can pick up an AoE breath weapon, which is a really, really big deal in terms of diversifying what your character is capable of doing. I love the Dragon Instinct Barbarian, and you do have a ton of different options as far as customizing which dragon exactly are you related to that can end up having an impact on your damage types, and that gives you an ability to customize that barbarian a little bit more than some of the other barbarians as well. Now we have the Bard, and I've got to put an asterisk on this one because I think there's a best one, but it's a little complicated. So, the Maestro Bard is, in my opinion, just the best Bard subtrack. Mostly because lingering composition is so incredibly strong. Anything that you can do to cheat action economy in this system is going to be powerful. You have 3 actions a turn. You can make it feel like 4, your character is stronger. You can make it feel like 5, even stronger. If you can make it feel like 6, now you're just getting crazy. Or you're a summoner. And lingering composition, making it so that you don't have to sustain your focus spells, your composition cantrips, is really, really powerful. It is, in fact, so powerful that if you are not a maestro, you should probably become one via the multifarious muse feat, which allows you to pick up another muse. Maestro also gives you access to the fortissimo composition, which can allow you to swing the numbers harder than a bard normally does. And the bard is a class about support and swinging the numbers with its various composition cantrips. Fortissimo just lets you crank it up to 11 for a short period of time, but guess what? Sometimes a short period of time is all that you need to turn the corner on a difficult combat. I will say that I think if you are optimizing a bard, you start as maestro and then you go into polymath. You immediately will pick up the versatile performance feat, making your already best skill even better as it's allowed to be used for other things. And then you can pick up esoteric polymath, meaning that you pick up a spell book as if you are a wizard and you gain the ability to learn some extra spells, which can give you more flexibility. So if you're already relatively flexible bard can shift between combat, like different combat modes by changing what composition cantrip you're playing, and you gain the ability to swap out spells from like a day-to-day standpoint, I think that makes your character very, very powerful. Moving on to the champion, I think you have 2 incredibly strong options and a few more that are like just below this in terms of power level. I think you've got to pick between justice and redemption in a vacuum. If you care about your personal damage output or your party needs damage output, I really like the justice champion because you get to prevent damage while adding your own damage to the field as a reaction. And we know, just generally speaking, that reactive strikes, attacks of opportunity, are very, very strong as a way to increase the damage potential of a character. As a champion, you won't necessarily be doing the most damage, so gaining the ability to output additional damage is very strong. And the justice cause, I think, becomes stronger if you are doing it with a reach weapon, as the combination of reach and nimble reprisal, which allows you to step before making your reactive strike, allows you to cover a relatively large area. But there is also just another cause that allows you to just automatically cover your entire area, and that is the redemption clause, which I think the community views as the most powerful. This allows you to either prevent all of the damage that someone would take, or you prevent some of the damage and you just add a status effect. And you are adding that status effect with no save, which is quite powerful. So I feel like the redemption cause is the more flexible one here. It just automatically covers your entire aura without requiring any follow-up feat. Now that said, I think other champion causes are viable, but these are my 2 recommendations in a vacuum. Moving on to the cleric, I think this is a very level-dependent choice. In the early game, I believe that the War Priest cleric easily outshines the cloistered cleric. And this has to do with the fact that in the early game, at low levels, when strength marshals add their strength modifier to damage, they tend to easily out damage casters. And especially at level 1, the strength marshal who can be running around dealing a d12 of damage and adding 4 damage on top of that ends up being really strong. And if the war priest can do that while also having access to a ton of max level heals due to their healing font, well, you know, you have an incredibly flexible, competent character. As the war priest levels up, it might become more clear that it is a master of none of the things. It is a jack of all trades class. You're good at a lot of things. You're good at strikes. You're good at spell casting, but you're not the best at either of those. As the game moves on and spell ranks increase, the things that those spells are allowed to do get sillier and sillier and sillier. And it might be more important that you have a higher spell save DC so that you get the failure or even critical failure effects more frequently. So I believe once the cloistered clerics start becoming experts in their spellcasting modifier, I believe that they start to get better than the war priests. So I think this becomes a what levels am I realistically expecting to be at for the bulk of this campaign? And war priest clerics are great at low levels, and then I think as you get higher and higher and higher levels, cloistered clerics start to outperform them. The commanders don't have subclasses. You are instead going to be selecting tactics. And I want to take a minute to think about why you are playing a commander. Because I think a lot of people look at commander and they look to strike hard, which is 2 actions to allow one of your allies to make an attack action. And they go, oh man, I can make a full accuracy strike. And then my friend can make a full accuracy strike. I get 2 strikes at full map. This is awesome. Yeah, but you used 2 actions to make one of those attacks, right? So why aren't you just being the giant barbarian and using 1 action to make that same strike? And I think if you are playing a commander, the thing that should be drawing to you that class is the utility tactics. So when I look at a commander and I see something like gather to me, which could allow your entire party to stride as a reaction and reposition the entire party, that to me is what sounds strong. Being able to make everybody raise their shields at the same time, being able to make everybody move, I think those sorts of things are much more exciting and honestly powerful than something like strike hard. Are you going to use strike hard frequently? Yeah, absolutely. You want to be using offensive-minded tactics in a lot of cases because it does help with your damage output. But I don't think optimizing building a commander should be all about the damage and offense-focused tactics. I think the mobility ones are going to be the ones that secretly shine. And I just want you to kind of keep that in mind as you are building your own commanders. Next up are druids, and I recommend the Storm Order. I love Tempest Surge. I think it's an amazing focus spell. It is a renewable, because it's a focus spell, source of solid damage. It rolls d12s and scales up a d12 every level. And it has a debuff rider on it as well when enemies fail their saves. And I don't know how much more you can ask for from a level 1 focus spell other than it does d12 damages, it scales up every spell level, and it has a status effect associated with it. That is a great starting focus spell here. And because you have damage and status effects in a focus spell, which is a renewable resource, it takes some pressure off of your leveled spell slots. So this means that you are able to spend more of your spell slots on things like healing and utility. Sort of like how bards have multifarious muse, Order Explorer also does let you dabble elsewhere and pick up other focus spells. I'm much more excited about focus points than I am other focus spells on druids. And I don't like Order Explorer as much as Multifarious Muse, because I feel like with Multifarious Muse, you get something reasonable when you take that feat, and you get something good later. Whereas I feel like when you take Order Explorer, you get nothing. And when you take the feat later, you get another focus point for Tempest Surge. Admittedly, there is a little nuance here, as you can pick up something that is not just a reflex save to use with your focus spells, but Tempest Surge is great, and I find myself just spamming that. Next up is the Exemplar, and you don't have true subclasses here. You are going to be selecting 3 different icons instead. And to oversimplify, make sure that you are taking 1 weapon icon when you build an Exemplar. The class's damage output is like conceptually very balanced around you having at least 1 weapon. But generically, if you ask me which one of those icons is the best one, I'm going to be saying the Victor's Wreath every time. You get a baby bard ability, and you can buff up some allies in a close range to you, and a very strong transcendence ability that allows your allies to make reroll effects versus negative status effects. And this used to be stronger than it was. There used to be kind of no cooldown on this, and you could just spam this to get rid of whatever affliction is currently on your ally. And now they made it so that you can only benefit from this once. And looking at exact text here, which I'm not going to do very much for the sake of time in this video, but I think it's important here. Quote, each ally in your aura can immediately attempt a new saving throw with a +2 status bonus against 1 ongoing negative effect or condition currently affecting it that required a save. Use the result of the new save to determine the outcome of the effect, unless the new save would have a worse result than the original save, in which case nothing happens. Then the new part, each ally can gain this benefit against a given effect only once. So that's our errata nerf. However, at a slightly higher level, the Exemplar does get to make another build-defining choice, and that is the root epithet that you get at level 3. Generally speaking, the Radiant, which is the healing one, is probably the strongest. And if you aren't sure which one to take, that's the one that I recommend. Is it a full rank heal or anything like that? No, absolutely. But it is a nice amount of HP that will probably keep an ally from going down for 1 more hit. Let's move on to the Fighter. Now, the Fighter is another class that does not have true subclasses. And customizing your Fighter often comes down to feat choices and a very large choice that you make about your weapon mastery at level 5. As far as level 1 class feats go, you probably want to pick one of Sudden Charge, Vicious Swing, or Double Slice to start off your character in the right direction. And the choice between Vicious Swing and Double Slice might be tied into your level 5 choice of weapon mastery. If you don't know what weapon you want to choose because you are new to this system, I recommend grabbing a nice polearm that has reach. From level 1, you are going to have reactive strikes, and reactive strikes with reach are, I don't know, double 1.5 times the power level of reactive strikes that don't have it. Another thing to be thinking about in terms of choosing your fighter subclass is whether or not you are interested in having an empty hand for things like athletics maneuvers, or whether or not you want to pick up a trait such as trip on your weapon of choice. So with fighter, your subclass is kind of your weapon, kind of. So don't necessarily just go directly for the D12 weapon that does a lot of damage. Be thinking about those traits as well. And now it's Guardian time. The Guardian doesn't have subclasses. At least, it says it doesn't. But I think it does. You get a level 1 class feat, and I think it is very build-defining. And I think it is more build-defining than the choice of a lot of other marshals that are doing the same thing, because you are offered a massive choice at level 1. And that choice is how long do you want your distance for taunt to be? Because you can pick up a feat that makes it have a range of 120 feet versus the 30 feet that it normally has. And you might go, hey, that's not a very big deal. I'll just pick it up at level 2. Well, that's where you're wrong, kiddo, because Guardian feats are good. And they're good at like every single level. So if you miss a guardian feat, you actually might never end up picking it up because there are just going to be better and better and better guardian feats offered at most levels. So this is a very, very big moment for your character. If you are trying to have your cake and eat it too, remember that natural ambition humans do exist and you can pick up multiple first level class feats. So if you say want bodyguard and long distance taunt, or you want defensive advance and long distance taunt, or reactive shield and long distance taunt. Remember what I said about guardian feats being good? Well, there's a handful of examples of like very, very reasonable first level feats. Then consider playing a natural ambition human. Is it boring? Is it a power gaming option? Yeah, absolutely. But it's going to feel real good. Next up is the gunslinger, and I am actually going to recommend the class archetype of the spell shot over the more traditional option of the sniper. I really like the spell shot because it allows you to cover elemental damage, which can be useful for triggering weaknesses. I think this subclass supports spellcasters very, very well, as you are going to be good at recalling knowledge, and you're going to get that recall knowledge for free as a part of your, what is it, Slinger's Reload, here called Thoughtful Reload. And you can essentially get a wizard archetype as part of being your spell shot that can eventually give you a Magus style spell strike. And this is giving you very, very high burst damage potential with your increased gunslinger accuracy. So if you have someone else who is setting you up by giving you even higher accuracy than normal or getting fear or other status conditions onto an enemy, the spell shot can absolutely delete enemies even harder than a normal gunslinger might. And while your spell slots on their own might not be crazy as far as damage output is concerned, getting the ability to cast some cantrips or some base level spells can really round out your character that might normally just be making ranged strikes and reloading all the time. As far as the inventor goes, I think the construct innovation is the best one, and it's not close. You get so much out of this in terms of what it adds to the battlefield. You're adding a ton of HP to the battlefield. You get to use your overdrive not only on yourself, but also on your construct companion. And you innately gain the ability to use two of your actions to give your companion, your construct, three actions. So you just get a lot from first level, and your construct innovation is going to be better than a lot of other pets because it gets modifications such as increased speed or a ranged attack that other pets and companions are not going to have. Now, I will say that this does come with a pretty massive downside. You are going to have a mandatory feat chain in order to keep up the scaling of your companion, just like you might if you were playing with an animal companion that you got from something like a Beastmaster archetype. So you will absolutely miss out on some of the other cool things that the inventor has to offer. If you go, hey, I really like some of these inventor feats, you should consider playing an armor inventor. Having an additional AC over a lot of other classes is a relatively strong draw. I think the inventor is the best one, so long as you're fine with sending a large number of feats at keeping this up. My recommendation for the investigator is forensic medicine. We've got one of these in my current home game, and she's enjoying her character a lot. This gives you battle medicine on steroids. Normally, after you battle medicine someone, that's it. You don't get to do it again that day. Well, now it becomes once per hour per PC, which at many tables means I can battle medicine each person, each combat. Is that always going to be true? No, but it will frequently be true. And it's not just battle medicine, you are getting an additional amount of healing equal to your level. And if you use some of your many investigator feats to go and scale that up with things like Paragon Battle Medicine, Godless Healing, Mortal Healing, and you can start doing all the Ward Medic stuff too, you can end up being a very, very solid healer if you choose to maximally invest in that avenue. And I like that this does not require you to engage with subsystems the same way that alchemical sciences does, which turns you into a baby alchemist. I will say that in the hands of a very experienced, very prepared player, I think the alchemical sciences is objectively stronger than investigator, but in the hands of the average player, I think investigator is just a very, very rock solid option. I will also say, as the item level scales up, alchemical sciences is going to become gradually stronger and stronger and stronger as the various elixirs that you are going to be able to make gain ever increasing amounts of utility. Next up is the kineticist, and you've got two things to think about. Am I going to be a single gate kineticist and focus on one element, or am I going to be a dual gate kineticist that focuses on starting with two elements and maybe even more later? Beyond that, you also have to start thinking about what elements you are interested in using. I like playing dual gate kineticists because you are better at targeting multiple defenses, especially at low level play. Kineticists aren't great at targeting multiple defenses unless they are dual gate. If you are a dual gate kineticist, you can probably have a fortitude save spell, a reflex save spell, impulse, and then your traditional impulse attack rolls. And you can target 3 defenses, which I think gives you a very well-rounded character. And you are also going to be able to cover a shocking number of damage types if you are a dual gate kineticist, especially if you take some of the feats that allow you to change the damage type of your impulse attack rolls. And I like the generalists that you can build as dual gate kineticists that have decent defenses and utility and damage rather than trying to maximize any one category. If you just want to maximize damage, unquestionably you go single gate fire kineticist, but that's not what I would really recommend as far as the best kineticist goes. It's the one that'll do the most damage though, and that's just very clear mathematically speaking. Without going too deep into all of the specifics, these are, in my opinion, the level 1 standouts from each one of the elements here. Shouting out specifically Tremor as the early fortitude save impulse that you can pick up. Flying Flame as just the most flexible level 1 impulse in terms of kind of weaving in and out of enemies. Magnetic Pinions as something that has huge damage potential if you're a little lucky. If you are going to mostly be playing some sort of adventure path or campaign where you're going to be fighting a ton of low-level enemies, and you know that, Magnetic Pinions is going to be eating good. Air gives you 4 Winds, which is a great utility impulse to move the party around. See that sort of commander-style interaction, but I find air very lacking, offensively speaking, until a little bit later on when you get the level 4 air impulses. Water all around has very solid options. If you are looking for an in-class reaction, Deflecting Wave is one of the rare times that you can actually pick up a reaction. And Wood gets Protector Tree, and I've talked about that in enough videos where I'm going to assume that you know that that impulse is absolutely silly. Now we're going to move on to the Magus. And I think this choice comes down to how often you want to spell strike. If you just want to be a damage turret, and your mindset is, I would like to roll the damage dice, then Starlit Span is for you. Your turns aren't really going to be dynamic, but they're going to be powerful. So this is your ranged Magus. You can sit there with your bow and spell strike from afar. You might not even need to move. You can just spell strike and do something to recharge it every turn. And if you don't mind that play pattern, this is the easiest way to cheat the bad action economy of the Magus. They have just a lot of time functioning. Great class overall, by the way, in terms of design. I love the class. But in terms of mechanics, they've got a hard life. Because you are trying to move and do a 2-action activity. and you are also probably trying to use your focus spells, and you are trying to do things like raise shields as well. And some of your focus spells are going to incur maps. You don't want to spell strike afterwards. They've got it tough. Entering Arcane Cascade, I've played Maguses where like that was just not a thing that I even considered as a part of my rotation, despite being a core class feature. But if you want a more dynamic play pattern, I recommend the Laughing Shadow Magus. My girlfriend played one of these, and it was really cool. You get to teleport, you get to become very fast, and you can deal some very, very solid damage even when you are not spell striking, as long as your foe is flat footed. So make sure you're bringing a flanking buddy because you sure don't have the actions to make them flat footed yourself as a Magus. Now we move on to the monks, and they don't have subclasses. They are going to get a stance selection instead at level 1. Okay, technically they're called class feats, but let's be real, we know what's going on here. Now there are 12 of these, which can promote very, very different playstyles. With monastic archer allowing you to do your whole flurry of blows things from a range being perhaps the most interesting one. I think looking to the advancement feats of your stances later on can be very informing for which one of the feats are going to be best for your build. And after honestly spending a very long time reading about the various monk options, I liked Wolf Stance and Stumbling Stance the most. As fun as it is to go like, haha, I would like to flurry of blows with my D10 Dragon Stance, I don't necessarily think Dragon Stance is one of the better stances. Wolf Drag is a really cool level 6 feat that requires Wolf Stance. It gives you a fatal D12, and if you hit with your attack, you just get to knock the enemy prone with no save. And just guaranteed action economy denial on no save is very strong. And a monk in one of my previous campaigns took Stumbling Stance, which gives Stumbling Feint. This is a free feint that has upside on Flurry of Blows. Normally with a feint, you are making the target off guard to your next attack, whereas I think Stumbling Feint is they are off guard to every attack that turn or every attack in Flurry of Blows. I don't exactly remember which it is. Note that technically speaking, you could choose not to take a stance at level 1 if you wanted to take some key spells. I don't remember if they do key or chi as the pronunciation. If you wanted to do some key spells and you want to pick up a stance later on, that is a perfectly valid way to proceed with your character as well. Although I find that the stances are very strong and worth doing at level 1 as a monk, and I tend to like to pick up key spells later on. As we move on to the Oracle, I've got 2 recommendations for you. Number 1, if you look at the Oracle and go, man, this curse-bound nonsense sounds like a lot of work, pick the Cosmos Oracle. It allows you to largely ignore the downsides of Cursebound. I have played a Cosmos Oracle myself in a handful of sessions in a side campaign, and it was very, very powerful. I will say the granted spells that you are getting are pretty mid, but your focus spells are very strong. The second focus spell you get at I think level 6 is Interstellar Void, and it is just absolutely absurd. It just allows you to fatigue an enemy, which is something that normally does not happen. That's pretty rare in my experience. In case you're not familiar with Interstellar Void, it is 3d6 cold damage immediately and the first time each round you sustain the spell on future turns with a basic fortitude save, and the target is just fatigued for as long as the effect persists. As long as you are willing to keep sustaining that spell turn after turn, which you probably are because it's great, that target is just fatigued. Great for a 3rd level focus spell. But if you would like to be the blaster caster version of the Oracle, the Flames Oracle is your go-to there. It has much better granted spells. You're going to be getting things like Blazing Bolts and Fireballs there. But I will say that its focus spells are a little awkward. Not bad, just awkward. So, for example, their initial focus spell requires you to kind of spend 2 actions setting it up and then deal fire damage afterwards for a large amount of persistent fire damage. It's worth it, but it means that your character has a setup turn. And then its second focus spell, Whirling Flames, is a ton of damage, but it's a heighten +2 spell, which means that it's going to be really good for a while, and then it's going to be average for a while, and then it's going to be really good for a while, and then it's going to be average for a while. So there's going to be some oscillation of power level there. However, your blasting is going to come with more of a downside, as you are literally going to catch on fire as a Flames Oracle. Alright, now while I'm trying to keep these to like a minute or two for each one of these, we're going to go long on the Psychic, because this is the most complicated class at character creation, in my opinion, as you got this conscious mind and this unconscious mind, and some of the things that you're going to get later on are not immediately apparent from character creation. So here we go. Let's start with the unconscious mind at the bottom, because that's easier. The unconscious mind determines your key ability score and what you get to do while your psyche is unleashed. And I really like emotional acceptance here. You're going to end up with charisma as your key ability score, and you're going to gain the ability to dish out some healing while your psyche is unleashed. And I like that a lot, as you have probably seen with exemplar choosing the radiant epithet. I think being able to make sure that your party survives is very important. Now, you're also going to be making a conscious mind decision, which gives you your cantrip and your focus spells. Which on psychics is going to initially mean your amped cantrip, then you're just going to get full-on amped focus spells later on. When I first started looking at psychics, I thought the oscillating wave was the strongest one, as you get very, very long range cantrips. Like you can have a frostbite at a range of 120 feet at level 1, and that is a flexibility that a lot of spellcasters just aren't going to have. But as time went on and I tried out other psychic builds, I became much more interested in the other options. And I don't think there is a clear best one here. I like Infinite Eye as a lot. You get the ability to cast Guidance as a reaction, which can massively, massively change combats. And you get Glimpse Weakness as well, which is a very strong way to weaponize your third action. And Infinite Eye actually ended up being my favorite psychic over time. And I had fully glossed over how powerful it was in my first couple of read-throughs of the class. But I also think that Tangible Dream is very powerful. But it's not powerful in the offensive way, it's powerful in the defensive way. Because you get to cast Shield on an ally, and with Amped Shield, you can potentially shield block multiple times for that ally. And if, and this is a big if, you are willing to get into melee range of enemies, Imaginary Weapon can hit very, very hard. Now, you might need to support that imaginary weapon with some status effects or something like that to make sure that it is going to land, but imaginary weapon will absolutely delete foes if it lands. But with all this being said, this is very level dependent, because at level 6, you're going to start picking up those third level focus spells, and then your evaluation of all of the subclasses might vastly change. For example, I really don't like Silent Whisper early on, but then at level 6, you can get Shatter Mind, which when amped is a very large area, enemy only AoE damage on a will save. And that is a lot of cool things. I believe it maxes out at a 60-foot cone. Yeah, when amped, 60-foot cone or 3d10 mental damage on a will save that can potentially also stupefy foes. There's a lot to like there. So while generally speaking, I have been able to say, this is one of the best things, this is one of the best subclasses for this class. With Psychic, it's just so incredibly complicated. I think the unconscious mind is easy, but the conscious mind is much, much, much harder, which I think is the sign of a very, very well-balanced class. Now let's move on to the ranger. And without going into all of the numbers here, the White Room math is very similar for flurry and precision. It's hard to go wrong choosing either of them, but I do think precision is better because precision requires no teamwork. I think if you have an ally buffing you up and making it so that your hits are going to deal more damage, you can get a lot of extra mileage out of flurry. But if you are just kind of building your character in a vacuum, or you are building for something like Pathfinder Society play, I like Precision Ranger more. And one of the reasons that people cite that Precision is better is because it works very, very well with animal companions. And there's a lot of posts out there talking about how if you have a bear animal companion and a Precision Flurry Ranger, that you can do absolutely nutty amounts of damage. And while that is true on paper, my experience with the Rangers in practice is that their on paper damage output with animal companions is not actualized in many cases because your companion gets downed, your companion is in the wrong spot, you don't have the action economy to move and then still strike with your animal companion. And perhaps that is a topic for another video, so we'll just kind of go and call that there. Now, I will say that Rangers have pretty good first level class feats. Not impressed with the Ranger as a class as a whole, but as far as first level options, you've got 4 strong options, and this is kind of like your secret subclass, where you are choosing to pick up an animal companion, the ability to get better with crossbows, the ability to shoot your hunted prey twice, or the ability to attack with 2 different weapons. And so this is kind of your secondary subclass that has a lot to do with what is the fantasy of how your ranger plays out. In my head, when I think ranger, I think this character is an archer in some capacity. I think Legolas. But other people are going to build these as just like melee martial characters that are just getting in the mix with 2 weapons. I don't think you can go wrong if you pick one of these 4 feats as your first level ranger subclass. They're all pretty good. Next up is the rogue. This is another rare case where I think there's just one option that is better than everything else, and that is the thief. The thief lets you use dexterity on your damage, for your accuracy, for your armor class, and for all of your dexterity based skills. This means that you are as single attribute dependent as possible in this system. And this means that you're very good at taking a stat for fun or a stat for roleplay purposes rather than just having to raise your key ability stat and then your dexterity for armor or something like that so many classes feel. And I think this allows you to take advantage of your various skill trainings and skill increases very, very well. And so if you want to make a rogue that has a bunch of intelligence or a bunch of charisma, it's so easy to do that without feeling like you are missing out on some primary combat stat for doing so. And I think it's the best subclass for that reason. Now, I will say that there is a very good class archetype, the Avenger Rogue, that has a lot of really cool potential and can do some wild things in terms of damage output, as you can sneak attack on your hunted prey with whatever your god's favored weapon is. And the sneak attack is not balanced for you running around with a D12 weapon, right? So you can have some absolutely silly damage rolls if you go that direction. Or you can gain access to some weapons that you normally can't sneak attack with. I think they are called sawtooth sabers, is something that you could potentially like be running around and dual wielding and trying to get your sneak attack with. The one thing I'll say about the Avenger Rogue, though, is that I think it is best at like around level 4, where you have the class archetype and you get to take twin takedown. But I think later on, the feats that it gets aren't necessarily better than traditional rogue feats. As we move on to the sorcerer, I think there's 2 good options. I think if you are looking at the arcane spell list, the imperial sorcerer is the best. If you are looking at the primal spell list, the elemental sorcerer is the strongest. Both of these have good generic and usable blood magic effects, and one of my biggest complaints about the sorcerer is that some of the blood magic effects just kind of do close to nothing. The Imperial Sorcerer gives you a generic +1 to AC and saving throws. That's totally solid. And the Elemental either gives you some bonus damage or makes you better at intimidation checks. And the options that you have for both of these, both options both are good. The Imperial Sorcerer has Force Barrage as a granted spell, so you just very, very easily can round out a turn with a single action Force Barrage just to go and trigger your blood magic. And the Elemental Sorcerer just comes with a rock solid set of damaging spells. Although I will say, not every Elemental Sorcerer is cut from the same cloth. I believe Fire and Metal offer you the best set of spells, and you really, really, really need your spells to be good, your granted spells to be good on a sorcerer, because your granted spells are going to be the ones that are triggering your blood magic. And that's something you want to be doing very, very regularly. If the elemental list is giving you, your lightning bolts and your fireballs, you're going to cast those. You're going to need that AoE damage. And so if your AoE damage that you are getting from your granted spells triggers your blood magic, that's great. And there are some very, very neat combos that you can do with sorcerers and blood magic, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Check out Pathfinder's guides on sorcerers if you are interested in that. For the summoner, I think the plant Eidolon is very easily the best one. You have access to the primal spell list, which is very strong. It's got great offensive spells and the heal spell. And if you're not going to have very many spell slots in a day, might as well make sure they can all be bangers. The plant Eidolon has an absurd reach as you go up in levels, maxing out at a reach of 25 feet with proper investment, which is a wild thing to say, especially since you can do athletics maneuvers such as tripping with that reach. And since you also can have an Eidolon attack of opportunity, you can do things like long range trip a foe, cool, it gets up, and then you get to just whack it with your attack of opportunity, or cover just a silly, 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 silly amount of the battlefield with your reactive strike. The plant Eidolon is unquestionably the best attack of opportunity Eidolon, and I think overall the best battlefield controller. There are other reasonable Eidolon choices, but I think the summoner is a standout one, and I've got a full summoner guide if you want to really go into my thoughts on the summoner. I think the swashbuckler has another S tier option that is just better than everything else, and that is the braggart. And this is the one that focuses on demoralizing. And everybody loves it when you demoralize, because every strike is going to be more effective against that foe. Every spell is going to be more effective against that foe. Your skill actions, guess what? They're going to be more effective. Fearing enemies, frightening them is kind of like de-leveling them. So if you are going to very, very consistently be giving frightened to the foes, all of your party members are going to like that. Whereas some of the other swashbuckler styles are what I call selfish, in that they make their own actions better against the enemy rather than making the entire party's options better against that enemy. And some of the other swashbuckler styles run into the multi-attack penalty, as they want to be doing things like tripping foes or doing athletics actions or dirty trick style stuff. And then do you really want to use your panache right away while you have map? Ooh, I don't really know about that. Next up is the thaumaturge. Now, I recently did a video where I did sort of a tier list of all of the thaumaturge implements, and my conclusion there was the regalia, the tome, the amulet, and the weapon are probably the best one. If for the purposes of this video I have to pick one of them as absolutely the strongest, I think I am going to pick the tome. No matter what sort of campaign you are in, no matter what level you are at, it is just going to be good. as you level up and you invest more into the tome and you gain its increased abilities and you gain access to things like intensify vulnerability, I think it just gets better and better and better and better. And the thaumaturge is already weaponizing information. This just makes you even better at doing that. And it's just consistently good at all levels. A lot of times I will take weapon as the second implement that I am going to take on a thaumaturge build, as it does get a pretty major power up at level 5, and tome is just rock solid all of the time. I think since I have talked so much about the thaumaturge recently on another video, I'm going to call that good for this section. All right, we're on the witch. We're going to talk about the resentment witch. It's incredibly good. Maybe bordering on busted, like, hey, maybe ask your GM before you do this to them. The ability to extend negative debuffs is absolutely devastating. And when you are playing tough fights in particular, where you really, really need to lower an enemy's stats because they are just hard to hit or it's hard to make them fail saving throws, the resentment witch is absolutely going to shine. I'm going to talk about something else here as well, because not everybody enjoys the occult spell list. For example, the occult spell list is not very good at blasting. So if you find that you would like to blast a little bit more, consider playing Ripple in the Deep instead. The familiar ability there allows you to waste enemy actions by repeatedly pushing them away from the familiar. So if they are wasting one of their actions every turn by moving back towards you or back towards your familiar, you are doing a similar thing as the resentment witch is doing. You are wasting enemy actions, you are making that enemy significantly easier to defeat. So I think if you are not interested in the occult spell list, I would be looking at Ripple in the Deep pretty darn seriously. And this will bring us to our final class now, the Wizard. Now you have two major choices to make at level 1 as far as your subclass is concerned. You're going to choose your arcane school and you are going to choose your arcane thesis. I think as far as the arcane schools go, I've come down to liking battle magic and unified magic theory. As far as a traditional arcane school and curriculum goes, battle magic is my choice. I would say that this is not sexy. I don't think it's exciting, but it's just solid. You have a bunch of combat all-stars on your spell list. You essentially have a force barrage as a focus spell, and you're pretty comfortable preparing a bunch of utility spells because you know that you have combat covered through your battle magic spells. I think this is competing with unified magic theory, which doesn't give you curriculum spells, and instead you gain the ability to drain bonded item once per spell rank. And as your characters level up more and more and more and more, that becomes just a silly amount of times that you can use drained bonded item. Admittedly, the drain bonded item of your highest level spell slots tends to be the ones that have the highest impact, but the ability to spam your reaction spells and know that you can just get them back later when you need them, or hey, how many of this spell like revealing light or laughing fit am I going to need today? Oh, I made the wrong call on that. Cool, I'll drain bonded item at that lower level spell slot and get that spell back again. I think you can't go wrong with either of those two options. Although one of the things that I will say here is that in a roleplay heavy campaign, you might have a ton of success with some of the more roleplay oriented spell lists. As far as the arcane thesis goes, I think spell blending and spell substitution are both quite strong. Spell blending is more max level spell slots, and in a combat heavy campaign, that is going to be the clear winner, especially when you consider that you can drain bonded magic item to get another max rank spell slot. Wizards can be going absolutely wild on spamming high level spell slots. If you are in a more roleplay heavy campaign and you find yourself using your magic to solve puzzles and get through difficult situations, I think spell substitution may end up doing better for you, as wizards normally have a ton of flexibility and can prepare well from day to day, Well, spell substitution lets you prepare well within that day as well, and that can be incredibly powerful, especially if you have taken the time to learn a bunch of neat spells. And with that, we have now covered the best subclass for every class in Pathfinder 2e, at least all the fully released ones. And we've even covered the ones that don't really have subclasses. If you think I missed something or you disagree with me, get down in the comments below. And if you made it this far in the video, I imagine you've been watching for like an hour and a half, maybe over multiple sessions. Consider leaving me a like on the way out, that sort of thing. It means a lot for the large projects like this one. With that, I'm going to call it a night. I hope you have a great rest of the day or evening, wherever or whenever you are. All right, see ya.